I've been working at Google as a software engineer since last year after I escaped unemployment, and so far it's been a little disappointing. I've reversed zero linked list, inverted zero binary trees, and solved zero dynamic programming problems, but at least I get to eat free food every day. Okay, but in seriousness, I'm gonna give you my first impressions of working at Google. One, from just like the overall employee experience, just the culture and stuff like that, and also from the technical side. Of course, I'm not gonna leak anything, but I think this will give you a pretty good picture of what engineering is like at Google. To start with, I have to say that the culture is pretty good. In terms of just friendliness, like people are very nice. It's definitely not a toxic place at all. I know that's kind of the rumor sometimes about FAANG companies that, yeah, you get paid a lot, but they're really stressful. Now, Google definitely is not the case. Maybe there are other tech companies that do have a toxic culture. With Google, everybody is super nice. And maybe it's like a fake niceness, who knows, but it's definitely better than dealing with people who are mean to you. In terms of work-life balance, I will say that from the rumors that I heard about online haven't been quite true. Some people make Google out to be a place where you can just kind of sit on your hands and just like, sit at the beach all day, not do anything, not have to work or anything like that. That's definitely not been the case for me. I mean, there is work to be done. There are deadlines, all that kind of stuff. That said, the work-life balance is not crazy bad either. I think I probably work about 40 to 45 hours a week. I think that's probably about average in my team. I'm sure there's teams that work a lot less. There's probably some teams that work a lot more, but I think this is a pretty fair range. It's a little bit more than I expected to be working at Google, which is probably why I don't upload as frequently as I used to. But at the same time, I'm not going to complain. It's a pretty good job. Now, I'm sure most people have heard about Google's free food, and yes, the free food is pretty good. I usually eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the office, so I probably save a good amount of money on that, which is nice because I'm pretty cheap. But I will say that some of the offices are pretty inconsistent with the food. Like when I went to New York City, the food there was tremendous. It was like gourmet chefs cooking food, and there were so many different options, such high quality food. But over at the Seattle office where I usually work, it's definitely not as good as New York City. It's not even half as good. Usually they have the same thing almost every single day for breakfast. It gets kind of old after a while, but I'm cheap, so I eat it anyway. But overall, no complaints. I mean, there's free snacks, free drinks, and all that stuff. So if free food is something you're looking forward to, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. In terms of the tech, this is really the most interesting part for me, and maybe for a lot of you, especially the engineers who are watching this. Google has a ton of internal tools, libraries, frameworks, and all that stuff. I don't think there's a single company, a single tech company that has the amount of tools that Google does. And a lot of the tools that first started at Google have become open source. A lot of really interesting work has gone into distributed systems at Google, if you've heard of MapReduce and all the things that spun out from that. And because of that, a lot of the internal tools make things really, really easy. And that's kind of the positive side of it. There's definitely a negative side of it, which I'm going to mostly talk about now. In my opinion, there's a lot of abstraction and probably too much abstraction. Some of the internal tools are nothing like you would see in the open source world. Sometimes people refer to Google as like a tech island because it's so different from everything else that's going on in the tech community in terms of open source. And the downside of that is sometimes your prior knowledge about working with tools and frameworks does not apply at all. Like at Google, there's tools that you would never see anywhere else, and that makes it hard to work with. If something goes wrong or if there's a bug or an issue that you have, there's like 20 layers of abstraction and you don't even know what's going on under the hood anymore. You don't know, is it a bug with the tool that you're using or did you do something wrong? It's really hard to figure this out, and it makes it even harder that honestly the documentation, the internal documentation at Google is not amazing at all, which was pretty surprising to me. More frequently, you're better off just reading the source code. You might have heard that Google has like a mono repo, which basically all the source code for Google is in one single repository. And it's actually a lot easier if you're having an issue with like a library or something, just to read the source code, just to see exactly what it's doing, than to actually go and read the documentation because it's either out of date or just completely missing. There's a few internal tools at Google that I've used that I feel like now I can't live without, but at the same time, I would probably prefer working at a company that uses like a public cloud or like more open source tools, so I would kind of know what's actually going on under the hood. I think sometimes Google abstracts way too much so that you're not really learning what's going on, but also if there's an issue, the abstraction makes it hard to deal with. You might know that Google does have its public cloud, Google Cloud Platform, but in many cases, the internal tools that Google has are actually superior to the ones that are on Google Cloud Platform, which is also why most teams at Google have not been using their public cloud that they sell to other people. They actually use internal tools because they're usually more powerful, and I guess people are just used to using the internal tools. That's different than what Amazon does, at least from what I've heard. Most of the time at Amazon, you're actually using AWS. You're not using just a random internal tool. But there's definitely trade-offs. Like, one of the good things is that sometimes design questions are completely taken care of. Like, very few times are people at Google asking, oh, what database should I use? How should I design the database? You know, how should I scale it? Blah, blah, blah. Because Google has a database called Spanner, which pretty much breaks CAP theorem, and it's pretty much the go-to database. Like, do I need a scalable database that's consistent and highly available? Well, let me just use Spanner. Like, it's not even a question. People are just like, okay, just throw that in Spanner. Who cares? It takes care of like 99% of problems that you're ever going to need. And the best way I can describe the internal tools, the abstraction, and the unintuitiveness that kind of comes with it sometimes is probably with an analogy. You might already have some concepts of programming, like for example, writing functions, right? You can write a function and then you can reuse that function by calling it in many different places. Sometimes there's internal tools at Google that feel very different from anything you've used before. It feels like I'm programming with a bag of M&Ms sometimes. Like, okay, I throw a bunch of M&Ms on a table, I'm, doing something with them, and something breaks for some reason. And then I take the problem to a senior engineer, I show them, okay, like, what am I doing wrong? Can you help me out here? And then let's say they point to one of the brown M&Ms and say, hey, that's not an M&M, that's a Reese's Pieces. That's a classic mistake to make. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, I guess I wasn't supposed to do that. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. This doesn't even feel like programming that I'm used to. And that's kind of what it's like. You really have to shift your mindset to do things like the Google way. There's a lot of like abstractions and you're not dealing with stuff that you're used to dealing with. You're instead dealing with those Google created abstractions, which are meant to be helpful, and usually they are, but sometimes they just make things a lot more difficult. So in case I sounded negative in this video, I do want to say I can't imagine a corporate job being much better than working at Google. It really has been an incredible experience so far. I'm super grateful. Every day I wake up and I feel like I don't deserve to have such a good job. I'm really enjoying it so far. I wish I had more time to do YouTube, but I do still have a few tricks up my sleeve. So please stay tuned. We have some new stuff coming up, not only on the YouTube channel, but also on neetcode.io. So definitely stay tuned. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. It really supports the channel a lot. And hopefully I'll see you pretty soon. Thanks for watching.